All right, if you're a law student, this video is for you. I think VC law is one of those underrated areas that not a lot of people know about, but is actually a really fun and lucrative area of law. Over the years, I've helped tons of law students land their dream jobs at firms like Sonsini and Cooley and Gunderson and others, where they are making lots of money, helping startups and working with investors and having a blast. Today, we're going to talk about what you do in venture law, and stick to the end, and I'll provide some tips on how you can really gain an edge to land a job at one of those top law firms. All right, so let's go through the different things. There are basically three things that a venture attorney will do. The first one is they help companies set up their business. This is pretty straightforward. So if you want to start a company, an LLC, or a corporation, or an S Corp or whatever, a good VC attorney will help the company get everything set up properly to be able to raise venture capital later on. The next thing they do, and this is the thing that really sets them apart from other corporate attorneys, they'll spend a lot of time creating the documents and helping you negotiate those documents when you're actually raising money from investors. So the way that flows is, as a company, you're going to go and meet with a bunch of different venture funds, right? And hopefully you get lots of meetings, you're able to pitch your story and what you're doing and really get them excited about the vision, right? The VCs then will work with you and will oftentimes issue a term sheet and say, hey, here's our term sheet that basically outlines the deal, right? Here's how much we think the company is worth. Here's how much we'll invest. Here's all the different rights and privileges that we demand to have as part of doing this deal. A real estate attorney will then work with the company to review that term sheet, push back on the VC and say, hey, this is fine, but we think that we should get this term instead of that one, or we should tweak the term a little bit, so on and so forth. So they kind of become your advocate to help you negotiate and navigate that whole process of negotiating your term sheet back and forth. Once the term sheet's more or less agreed to on both sides, right? Everybody agrees on the valuation and the amount they're going to raise and how much time they have to raise and what kind of downside protections they're going to get and what kind of voting rights and so on and so forth. They sign, and then from that point on, they're going through confirmatory due diligence, and they're preparing what we call the closing docs, which are comprised of a number of different documents. The closing docs are comprised of a series of different longer docs, and some of these are like can be hundreds of pages long. So you have like the certificate of incorporation. Under the certificate of incorporation, that's where new shares are authorized to be sold to investors. And the certificate of incorporation will help define the different rights and privileges of those shares. You then have the stock purchase agreement, which is basically the agreement that says, hey, we're going to sell these shares to the investors. So we authorize them in our certificate of incorporation, and now we're going to sell them through the purchase agreement. Another document we might have is the investor rights agreement. And this details specifically all the different rights that the investors have, what happens when things go sideways, what happens when there's a liquidation, like all of those different aspects of a deal. The reality is there's a lot of negotiation and back and forth that happens in these docs over terms and things that honestly have a very low likelihood of actually occurring. But you want to have it well defined in the event that it does happen, because it will save a lot of time, energy, stress, and so forth if you have clear guidelines on what's supposed to happen when certain negative or positive events occur. You also will have different additional rights. These may sometimes be codified in other documents, like you might have a ROFR, which is a right of first refusal. That basically details what happens if somebody wants to sell their shares and gives rights to the current holders of shares to buy those shares, so on and so forth. And the last document is the voting agreement that basically outlines kind of board seats and how the different shares vote. As a venture attorney, you're going to spend time advising your client and helping them make the best decisions possible as they're negotiating these different documents. The last thing that a good venture attorney will do is they'll also spend time hunting for clients. And so networking and engaging with entrepreneurs is also an important part of the job. Now, a lot of that is referral driven, but really good attorneys are ones that are going out and they're bringing in business to the firm as well as being really good at negotiating. Okay, so if that kind of work sounds interesting to you as an attorney and you think you might want to be a venture attorney, let's talk about how do you get that job. Having talked to a lot of venture attorneys over the years, one of the things that I keep hearing is that they love it when they meet with law students that really can show passion for venture capital, entrepreneurship, et cetera, et cetera. And so my number one piece of advice is find ways to be able to demonstrate that passion and knowledge. I think one of the best ways to do that is to actually do a non-law related internship with a venture fund, a private equity fund, an accelerator, an incubator, a startup, something where you can actually roll up your sleeves and engage in the law side of startups, and where you can learn all the different aspects of a deal, right? To be able to talk about like, hey, this is pre-money, this is post-money, this is what an exit looks like, these are what liquidation preferences are, and be able to demonstrate, hey, this is an area that I'm super passionate about, and I'm going to be excited to work in that area. It's also, I think, super helpful to go out and network with companies. Because if you can go to a law firm and say, hey, yeah, by the way, not only am I super interested in this, not only do I have a lot more knowledge than most law students, especially on the business side because of my internship, but I've also met with a lot of startups, and I think I could actually bring real business to the firm. That is going to be like a total game changer, because most law students aren't thinking that way. They're not thinking with a business mentality. And so you can really set yourself apart. So anyways, there are a lot of great reasons to work in venture law. I think it's one of the most interesting areas of law. I mean, you get to work with great entrepreneurs and get to kind of ride along with them and see their successes. You can also make really good money. It's really easy to differentiate yourself with kind of alternative experiences like internships at venture funds and so forth, and also networking and building relationships with companies and being able to really demonstrate that passion and interest. If you are watching this video and thinking maybe you don't want to work in law, but you're an entrepreneur and you really just want to get some insight into what venture law is all about, my piece of advice for you is to go talk to venture capitalists, find out who are the attorneys that they use. Typically, VC funds will use anywhere between 2 and 4 different law firms because, sometimes the law firm that they usually work with is representing the company that they might be investing in. And so, they need to have a good feel. You want to work with a law firm that does a lot of these deals at the end of the day. You don't want to be paying a lawyer to learn on the job how to do your transaction. Because a really good venture attorney will know like valuations, they'll know terms, they'll know what's going on in market, and they'll bring a certain level of credibility when you go and meet with a venture fund. If the venture fund hasn't heard of your law firm before, they may be skeptical, and they also may push to take advantage of you when it comes to terms, knowing that they can kind of push harder on certain things because your attorney's inexperienced. Bad legal advice is one of the most expensive things you will ever pay for, so make sure you get really good legal advice. If this video was helpful to you, check out some of my other ones like how to contact a venture capital fund. Thanks.